Welcome to Uplift, inspiring stories to uplift the world. I am Gemma Serenity Gorokov, and today we have Jacob McGill joining you for part 2 of this small series. So Jacob, my next question for you, what is your origin story? What happened around 17 years old in your life?
Okay, so it was really basically innocuous, right? I grew up in a small town and I lived 20 kilometers outside of town on an acreage. I was very fortunate that way. You don't always feel that way when you're a child, but my parents, I think my dad especially, had this like crucible moment and he's just like, I'm done with the city and I want out. So most of my childhood from 5 years old onwards is like forest, field, right? And all that space around me. And I think I have pretty good teeth because I couldn't even spend my allowance on candy, to be honest, right? Like there's just nothing around us. Our nearest neighbors were a kilometer away. And the house was off the highway down a gravel road. And so at 17, I had my driver's license. I was heading home after school one day. It was in the afternoon. It was a spring day. It was sunny. It was like, no kind of crazy conditions. But I think just because I was a young driver, I had hit some fresh gravel at speed and the truck was like fishtailing on it. Gravel's a lot like ice for people who don't experience those environments. I slid into the ditch. That's all. But I was young and I panicked. And instead of doing what everybody who's listening should do, slow the vehicle down and just stay in the ditch, right? I tried to get out. And so when I turned the wheel at speed, the wheel caught the ground, it came off, the rim caught the ground, and the truck went end over end 3 times. Up, rear, up, front, up, roof. And it apparently went around 75 feet. The roof was pretty caved in, and I broke bones from wrist to shoulder on both sides. Banged my head up pretty badly, and just a whole bunch of other like soft tissue and general injuries. And I was just hanging there upside down when some neighbor on his way home from work kind of looked into the ditch and saw me there. And so that's when help started. And this kind of crazy process of being close enough to home, somebody knowing that my dad knew first aid. He was one of the first responders. By the time the paramedics had arrived, my veins had collapsed to the point that they had to actually cut into my body to give me an IV. So I was on my way out. And they rushed me to an airlifted me to ICU. And by that point, I'd gone into a coma. And I spent some time in the hospital bed in that state, came out of the coma and was in the hospital bed for several months, basically. And, that's what the accident was like. Although with the work that I do now, I realized how much less I dealt with than my friends and family because I was unconscious for such a portion of the most intense and traumatic experiences of that, right? Our brains will protect us. And how there was some real work to do, with them and for them afterwards.
It's mind blowing. It's such a miracle. It's a miracle that you actually not only survive, but that you are thriving. There is one element that I missed. Where did you grow up? Where in the world was that experience?
Oh, yeah, of course. So officially, that is in West Central Canada, and geographically, the town I grew up in, the acreage I grew up on, it's kind of halfway between Edmonton and Jasper and what we call the foothills. And so the Rocky Mountains were just kind of visible there and about an hour drive away. And it's just kind of rolling hills and forest and that kind of stuff.
Okay. And in Canada, we also talk in kilometers, like in Europe?
Yeah.
Or do you just adjust because I used to speak that language too. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you actually went through that literally traumatic, physically and emotionally traumatic experience before your 20th birthday. That means that you actually grew up from 17 to 22, which is also a very important part of building your identity as an adult, with that injury and with that multiple injuries and that experience. A soul had to rebuild trust in being able to drive, being able to move, being able to interact, being able to live. And that, I guess, was something substantial in your experience, was it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was I don't think you can see the gravity of it when you're in it, right? And like I have the same perspective now when I work with clients and like seeing how like the nervous system, the brain, that kind of stuff, there's all these mechanisms in place where I think for the sake of safety, there's a certain level of dissociation, right? Like the coma is a classic example of that. It's the most obvious version of that. But there's all these different layers of it that took me time to unpack. It took me time to even recognize and understand and work through. And again, I think most of that work actually happens under the surface, right? But it took, years of going and being the participant and the student and that kind of stuff and all these different modalities and all these different workshops and all these different things to really get that stuff to shift. And as I said, like most of the shifting happens underneath the surface, right? Like posture doesn't change in a way that's visible. It's this thing that happens slowly over time, whether it's the improvement or the degradation of it. You don't really notice it going on until one day, like there's a complete difference there. And when I went into practice, I learned a very powerful lesson about it, just to show you how clear that is, right? Like, especially during the last 3 years that I had my clinic, I was doing a lot of insurance cases, working for lawyers who were funding that kind of stuff. And I got a name for myself as a problem solver. And I wouldn't notice this if it wasn't for that, because I had to do higher level notes, let's just say, because I knew the notes were going to court and things like that. And I was on the phone with doctors and reporting to the team. And so what I started to notice is, I remember the incident very clearly. I was looking at the intake notes from this one client, and day one, page one, they fill out the form, and I was asking her about her headaches. And we were 90 days in through the process of working together. We actually got in an argument. She's like, I don't have any headaches. I'm like, your handwriting, headaches. No, I've never had headaches. And this made me start paying attention to something. So I just continued paying attention. I wasn't smart enough to keep my mouth shut in the beginning, but when I eventually learned to just stay silent and listen, what I noticed is that the client would say, like every week, right? You take the notes, back pain, back pain, back pain, back pain. And then one day they'd stop saying back pain. But, and this is the part that I had to learn to remain silent about, if I said nothing and just waited, 6 to 8 weeks later, they'd walk in and they'd say, you know what? My back doesn't hurt anymore. And that's when I started to realize one of my teachers was absolutely correct. Like, she taught me the brain teaches the body and the body trains the mind. The mind is the caboose, right? And so our relationship with back pain, our story, our habit, all that stuff is up front. And the time it takes for us to realize, back to that habit change question you asked me, it's really this kind of 6 to 8 week window to be like, oh, right, this is different than I remember. And it slowly trickles in and we slowly realize that changes happen.
It's amazing. It's truly amazing. Wow. Thank you so much. Jacob, my next question for you. I know that you also have 80/20 media, and I know that I spent quite some time in your Facebook group discovering about that mindset work that you do to help people set clear goals that are achievable and achieved in a short period of time with absolute certainty. Do you want to bring us into that world too?
I would love to. So let's say the original choice was, solving a pain of my own. Like in my clinical practice, it hit this point where I was burning out. And that was because although I'd worked so much on my physical, neurological alignment, all that kind of stuff, there's this thing where my business had drifted out of alignment. And, I was serving other people in a way that I thought was, beneficial to them, but I kind of lost my way a little bit in me. And I knew the importance of resetting that. So I shut the clinic down, and I just thought at the time, like the way the world was changing, like I'm going to move online. And I started with this fantasy of like, it's going to happen tomorrow or overnight or in a week or something like that. And what ended up happening is it actually took pretty much a year to transition entirely from closing the doors to launching the 100yearplan.com and all that stuff. But part of why that took a year is I got sidetracked. And that's because I was working with somebody who at the time like knew the technical side of things. It could kind of work with me to answer all the questions. And I had these ideas of business development. I mean, I'd grown my clinic to a very successful practice, but I didn't understand how to digitize it. So we sat down and like, it's the same way I solve problems with my clients in the clinic, process. And we mapped out this process and we defined all the steps and looked at the parameters. And we got to a certain point in it where I just turned to him one day and I said, we have a service here. Like, do you want to start a company? Do you want to help other people do this? He said yes. And we launched within like a week. We had our first client within a month, and we brought in pretty much a new client every month in the next 18 months. We, became a corporation shortly thereafter. And what I love about it is I'd taken some of the places where I'd failed forward with the clinic, and I built the entire business from a Chromebook. Right? In my mind, I wanted to be able to get off a plane and go, where's my luggage? And then go to a big box store, buy another Chromebook, and be up and running. So we were already in the cloud with everything at the beginning. And at the same time, our clients thought we were a little weird too, because they're like, let's meet. I'm like, yes, great. Here's the link. Right. And they're like, what's that? I'm like, it's this thing called Zoom. Like, you don't have to drive through commuting traffic 45 minutes each way for us to have a 30-minute meeting. Like, believe it or not, this stuff actually works. So that's the origin of 80/20 Media. We originally started out as a company that used social media to get more leads for clients. And this was an interesting move at a time because the people we were speaking to back then were like, but my college age daughter will be home, next week on summer vacation. Can't she Facebook for me? And that was really the mentality of the time, right? Like that's what they thought social media was and the value of it. Obviously, that's changed over the last decade. Now, speaking about that change, we've gone on a complete trajectory shift as well. And it's all because of starting with the 100-year plan. Like my goal is to help the helpers. Right? I think there's so many people out there who, if they had a way of getting what they have in front of other people, they could end suffering for people. And so that's really our primary goal. We have a first principle, which is I'm only going to help you do the things that you love. We will automate, delegate, and systematize the rest of it for you, because you have no business doing things that you hate doing or you're not good at. That's not going to make a business for you. It's actually going to build you a job. Right. And like that's one of the main pieces I went through as my clinic grew and got more successful is I kind of defaulted back into having turned it into a job. And so the feeling of it's completely different. The alignment of it's the most important part. And that means you have to do internal work. So to sum it up, what I tell every single client in that space is if you bring your why, like we'll show you how. but we can't manufacture the why for you, right? You have to have this like burning desire. There's just got to be a problem you want to solve, a wrong that you want to right, something that you think needs changing, and you're confident that you're the person to help people with it. And if you have that, then the rest is easy.
That's truly fabulous. Thank you so much, Jacob. Where can people find out more information about that kind of topic? Because it's also essentially important. And does this business is still running right now? Okay, you got the question.
Yeah. I mean, 8020.media is our website, but we do most of our work through funnels, right? I'm not a big proponent of websites. I think you need them for legitimacy, but I think social media is for your branding, and then funnels are actually for sales. And so, we've got a whole bunch of free training out there. It's gift.8020.media for the gift call. Like, anybody can come for free, and I will help you grow your purpose-based business inside of that environment. Then we have a step-by-step plan to get you to your first six figures. That's club.8020.media. That's called the 100K Club. And inside of that, you'll find that I'm running another mission where I gave up on the idea that I needed to do sales a couple of years ago. And I just made a single commitment to deliver 1,000 six-figure business plans. Right. And this is part of something I call the ripple effect. And like, if I just push out $100,000 of value to 1,000 people out there, that's $100 million that I'm just gifting away. That's why it's called the gift call and the gift group on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And I don't need to worry about what comes back in return. I'm just going to show this opportunity to as many people as possible. And the ones who get it and want it will ask for help. The ones that want to do it themselves, they have the tools. And the ones that want to hang out on the sideline because they want to consume content or because they're not ready or, whatever, they'll do that. And it just completely freed me up. I got to move forward on like maintaining my alignment and having no attachments to outcome, which, that's what feels authentic for me. And that's what we help our clients do as well. And so really, we use something called the regenerative business model, which means I'm here to give you an operating system for a better life that contributes to the world. That's what we call a business. That's our definition of it.
So I must ask, because I'm very curious, and as I am also an entrepreneur, so a business owner, what is your level of income and where does that come from? As there is so much gift for free, money has to circulate in one way or another in your business too. Otherwise, it's not a business, it's a hobby, right?
I agree 100%. And a lot of people don't have that distinction between business and hobby. So let's touch that first. One of the first things I like to teach my clients is the definition of a business is you have a plan, and that plan is to put in $1 and get 3 out. Because you need 1 to pay yourself, your time and effort, 1 for systems, operations, marketing, and 1 for profit. Yeah. Right? And so that's vitally important too. And that's how you can tell you're building a business and not a hobby. So that distinction that you dropped is super important, and we repeat it constantly. Now, as far as what's going on for me, like, I built a 100-year plan, and I take on a very limited amount of one-on-one clients each year. And I have a very high success rate, and I actually have a guarantee behind that. If I can't get you across the finish line of pain relief, you can have your money back. So that's an income stream. And underneath that, there are our 4 group trainings. So now there's a secondary income stream, or technically 5 income streams in that one business. And the thing to remember about that is I figured this out in my clinic, and I maxed out at a 20-hour work week there, right? And I've reduced that even more. So I have depending on how many clients I'm seeing at any time, anywhere between 8 to 10-hour work week in the 100-year plan. Right? Over in the 80/20 media space, we run the free trainings, which are an hour here or there a month. We run some challenges or intensives. So that equates to around 10 hours a month where I'm sitting there going one to many, giving as much away as I can. Then the 100K club is just a once a week call. And then our client support for our upper tier stuff, the place where if you come in and work with us and you're accepted and qualified, can't just like buy your way in. We actually guarantee $100,000 of revenue when you work with us at that level, and you can't escape it, right? Like either you are hit by a bus or abducted by aliens, but other than that, we will take you across that finish line. There are 4 support calls a week, right? And so that is my total labor. That's the amount of time I have to spend, delivering to other people. It's not a significant amount of time. And I wanted to answer that first because I think a lot of people out there are coming into the entrepreneurial space, and it's nobody's fault, but with that employee mindset. And they're putting in more labor than they need to because they don't have the systems in place, because things aren't designed properly. And often they're feeling ground down by it because they're doing stuff that you shouldn't do, that you should automate or delegate as quickly as possible. Because if you don't, it'll bring a bitterness to the serving, right? Because you're like, oh, I have to do this again in order to get that, right? And there's that like grinding and employee mentality. It shouldn't feel that way. It should be based around your alignment. Now, moving forward, halfway through this, like, let's say 10-year journey of 80/20 media, I kept on hitting this wall because we're responsible for growing the client's business. I'm like, why is this so hard? And I talked to a couple of my mentors and one of my coaches, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, I have these amazing tools that I've been using for 15 years to organize my life, my structure. You mentioned like the goal setting and outcome stuff earlier. And so I systematized that in that first decade, right? By practicing certain things. I started off way at the beginning with like a calendar from the bank where I just divide each day into the 4 areas of life and just try and get 3 check marks, right? Like health and well-being, home and environment, business and finance, relationships with myself and other people. And I, built that thing. And then I hit this wall and it's like, oh, I have to deliver this to my clients. So I sat down and created 80/20 planning. And there's a free level there too. It's planning.8020.media. We have a free training called the Productivity Masterclass every month. And it is built into every level of our services at 80/20 media. You can come into planning, be an employee, stay an employee, improve your quality of life, and thrive. You can come in and get support from me and my company to, move forward as an entrepreneur. And as you climb up those levels, especially in that space where that $100,000 guarantee is, planning is mandatory, right? You have to plan. You must meet every Monday when we meet. These are the things I'm going to do this week. Every Friday when we meet, this is what I got done. This is what's moving to Monday. I pay the planning coach for the Wednesday coaching call on your behalf so that you're going there and getting coaching, because I'm not a coach, I'm a consultant, right? And I've built this system in because it solves the problems I was having with my own clients. So you could say it was selfish in some ways. I think of it as appropriately selfish, of like, they really need this stuff and I'm not the one to give it to them. There's people who are better at it. But I built the system, I packaged it, I automated the entire process and stuck it out there, right? And so those are 3 companies with income streams now. And there are 2 more that I'm involved in as the back-end guy, where I've built an entire infrastructure and I take a percentage of profits and shares inside of that. But what I've been doing since Q2 this year is I seem to have leveled up a bit because I'm now working as a fractional CMO as well. So everything I've talked about before is like B2C, where I'm serving customers. Because even a small business or somebody like you decide to work with me, I guarantee that 6 figures, you're basically self-employed, right? This space, I'm now working with companies. And I've closed like 3 significant contracts as a fractional CMO, and I'm working on paper work right now for actually being the CMO of a 4th business. They're bringing me completely into their company to take care of that position entirely. So I think we're at 7 income streams now. And I kind of, because I sat down with a fellow who has taken 3 companies public. His last business he took from 1.7 to 50 million and then exited. And he looked at my B2C stuff and he said, I could sell this all day long. I want you to know that. And then he asked me to do it for him inside his company. And so that's when I wrote that first contract. It was like, this is how we're going to grow your business for you. And then the very next thing he did after hiring me for that was come back and hire me to market it. So that's when I kind of realized I'd gotten it figured out.
Absolutely fascinating. So I can easily imagine that you have already a 7-figure income because it's just like a multiple when you add up everything, probably. I don't know. My last question, just to for clarification purpose. It's the 2nd or 3rd time I hear fractional CMO. Can you just explain that terms?
Yeah, for sure. We'll do a little workshop in how to create an offer, actually. Because again, I went out and got hired to do this service first, right? And like, okay, so I know how to do this because somebody's paying me to do it. Then I knew what the label was already, but when I was actually doing it, I knew it made sense. And this is a really important piece. I think all offers need to be based on validation, right? You ask a lot of people what they do, and they will talk for 7 minutes about how they do something and themselves, and you never hear how it helps you solve your pain. So an offer should really be the thing that solves the pain of the person in front of you. And so I validated that. I sat down with this fellow. I talked to him about his 3 companies. I talked to him about the business he'd hired me to work inside of. And what I learned is that what companies want and what the offer is, it's cmo.a20.media, we're going to double your sales revenue in under 6 months without hiring anybody new into your business. How are we going to do that? We're going to improve your current lead generation. As your chief marketing officer, I'm going to improve your marketing processes and systems. Then we're going to improve your operational side. So you get more leads in and you function better on serving them. And then the gap we close in between, optimizing your sales process. And so we close all 3 of those gaps because every business has 5 problems. They need leads or traffic. They need to convert it. They need sales, and then they need onboarding and fulfillment. And in the B2C space, I'm responsible for all of that. I build all of that stuff for you. In the CMO space, they have those things set up to a certain degree, not well all the time, but we show up and we optimize them. And then the fractional part is if you want to hire a CMO, first you have to go find a recruitment agency. Then you have to pay them to recruit. Then you have to interview the people that they find for you. Then you have to hire that person. Then you have to train them in your company. Then you have to get them to do work. So that is a multiple 6-figure spend plus a 6 to 12 month opportunity cost. The price to a company can be in the low 6 figures up from there, right? Depending on how much they're suffering from like loss and operational capacity and all that kind of stuff. And so really a fractional CMO is a fraction of that cost. You don't have to pay me a CMO's wage. I don't have to join your C-suite. You don't have to wait 3 months for me to get my feet under me. I turn on tomorrow. Our systems launch in the first 10 days. We functionally solve problems much faster and much easier.
That sounds like just magical. Jacob, it is truly amazing. And thank you also for sharing in real time the appropriate funnel that you have created under 8020.media, so 8020.media. and something before
Yeah.
that, depending if it is gift, it is consulting, if it is all these beautiful things. We're going also to make sure to put all of that in the description. Thank you with so much gratitude for sharing so much value. We do receive your gift and we do give it back because it is absolutely priceless, timeless, real, and enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to spend this time with you, and I really appreciate it. And gratitude.